Hi, thank you for joining us for this episode of Springdale Today. I'm your host, Mary Jordan. Joining us today is Tyson School of Innovation teacher Autumn Doss, who's going to be sharing a little bit about how she made some educational resources for the upcoming PBS documentary, The American Revolution by Ken Burns. Thank you for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Gosh, what an exciting opportunity. How did that come about for you that you got to do something so cool?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Last summer, not this past summer, but the one before, I went to a Landmarks Institute. It's put on by the National Endowment for the Humanities, and it was at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. And so it's mostly history teachers, but they do let a few English teachers come like me. And so I got to spend a whole week in Philadelphia learning about the Constitution and about teaching it to students, integrating it across the curriculum, and exploring Philadelphia, which I'd never been to before. And it was an amazing experience. And after that, they invited me to join their teacher advisory council for the National Constitution Center. So I've been doing that for starting my second year now. And then those people were offered the opportunity to apply to create resources for Ken Burns' American Revolution for PBS. And I was one of those, and I was very shocked to be one of those, but happy.
It's just amazing. You know, you started with one opportunity, it just kind of snowballed for you.
Absolutely.
What was your reaction when you found out you were one of just 12 teachers to get this experience?
There was some shrieking. I'm not going to lie. I was very excited. I have a strong curriculum writing resume. It's something I've done a lot, not only in my job at DTSOY, but also freelancing in the summers. And I had written all of the ELA curriculum, grades 9 through 12, for the Oxnard Union High School District in California. So I knew like my resume in that area was really strong, but I am not a history teacher. I've never taught history a day in my life. So I felt like that might really preclude me from being accepted. But they did take 2 English teachers, so I was really excited to be one of them.
And then what kind of format do the resources that you created take, and what are their intended use in the classroom?
Yeah, so they're full lessons. They've got introductory activities, things for students to do where they're interacting with the clips from the documentary, writing, lots of things like that. And then there's also extension projects teachers could use, so they can really kind of pick and choose like a menu of what they want to use. All the lessons are really intended to be plugged right into your existing curriculum, so it's not a whole new thing you have to do. And it's all free as well, which is cool.
That is really, free is cool. And that's one of the great things about PBS is all the access to educational information that you may not be able to otherwise get.
Absolutely.
Did your experience with this change your understanding of the American Revolution at all?
Yes, it changed it hugely. Like I said, I'm certainly not a history expert. And so it just greatly expanded my knowledge. The documentary is 12 hours long. It consists of 6 2-hour episodes. And so the first task we were assigned was to watch it. So my husband and I watched a lot of the American Revolution at home. And then I received 4 different topics that I was assigned, and they really occurred throughout the documentary. So I watched many parts of it many times, sometimes frame by frame, word by word in the transcript. So there's certain parts of it that I became extremely familiar with. So I definitely learned a lot.
What were the 4 areas?
John Adams, Abigail Adams, the Constitutional Convention, and Common Sense by Thomas Paine.
Oh, common sense. Did you have any opportunity to speak into that? They say, here's your 4.
They let us express our preferences from a list that they had, and then they divided it among the 12 teachers, however that worked out.
All right. Well, what can you tell me about the primary sources and some of the historical figures that you focused on as a part of this?
Sure. I really dug into a lot of John and Abigail Adams' letters to each other, and there are so many of them. They're all available online. There's a special database where you can search their letters because there's so many. John Adams traveled a lot, and so he and Abigail wrote to each other about everything that was going on in their lives, about everything that was happening in her neighborhood during the Revolution. So that's really where a lot of the information we have about what happened in the American Revolution. A good chunk of it actually comes from the Adams letters. So there's one in particular that I focused on. We know it as the Remember the Ladies letter. I wrote down this quote. She says, "I long to hear that you have declared an independency. And by the way, in the new code of laws, which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation. Wow. So she was a very strong and outspoken woman for her time. And her husband loved her so much. But we know that when those founders came together and wrote the Constitution, they didn't really remember the ladies. So that's kind of an interesting aspect of that, to see how much they love and how much he respected her and saw her as an intellectual. But at the same time, he wasn't really prepared, to do what she wanted him to do. But I think so much of the revolution is like that. There's amazing things that happen. No one ever did it before. We thought it was impossible. It's unbelievable. And it's wonderful, but on the other side of the coin, it's kind of terrible. And a lot of history is like that, really, too. I mean, humans are just such flawed, paradoxical creatures.
That's just an amazing way to say it. And as I understand it, first-person resources are the absolute best resources for historical context. So although these are personal letters back and forth to people, it really does give some insight. And wow, for her to be so brave to even put that on paper in that era, that was really something. Somebody you'd like to meet, maybe not John Adams, but perhaps his wife. What about little-known aspects of the revolution? We're all taught about it. We all know the bullet points. But was there anything about it that in hindsight really, you were like, wow, I had no clue?
Yes. So it really, especially the documentary does use so many primary sources and a lot that we're not even familiar with. So, normal townspeople, children even in some cases, writing about their experiences, that we get to hear their voices, that it really brings it home, in a way that I had not experienced before. So I did not really grasp how terrifying it was, which sounds dumb because of course a revolution is terrifying. But growing up, we focus so much on the Betsy Ross sewing the flag and the nicer aspects of it. I just hadn't really thought about these people, and by these people I mean everyone, because you were a part of the revolution, whether you wanted to be or not. It was happening. And so just the terror they were living in is really mind-blowing. I didn't know the whole city of Boston, almost the whole city, had to flee. And they were refugees in other cities for quite some time, a number of months, if not years. I'd have to look it up. But I didn't know that. I can't believe that. I've been to Boston a few times and walked the Freedom Trail and looked at all the things. And I don't know, it just never occurred to me that American people were fleeing their homes and having to live, with neighbors or whoever they could live with because they couldn't be there because of the revolution. I really didn't know that. It was just as much a civil war as the Civil War is. I really hadn't grasped that either. It was also neighbor against neighbor, brother against brother. And it was incredibly diverse. The whole founding of the country was done by people who didn't even have languages in common. The states were like different countries, basically. They had different religions, they had different everything. And so the fact that they were able to work together to do something that was pretty much impossible is very mind-blowing.
And when you consider, too, just the number of people, I mean, it's war. And we cannot tell the full story of anything within the classroom as much as we want to, right? You get a touch on the American Revolution, you get a touch on the Civil War, but the resources that you're creating, really, how do you hope that they create a little bit more depth and kind of help them work through the complexity of this? As you discovered, there's so much more to it than the bullet points.
For sure. Excuse me. I do hope that students will dig into the complexity of the revolution, like I was talking about, the diverse groups of people, and just really grasp through hearing all of those first-person accounts and seeing the paintings and pictures and everything else, that they'll just really understand how against the odds it all was, and how complicated and complex, like you were saying, it was, and that the odds couldn't have been more against us. And the fact that it happened is really amazing. And it's really, although there were terrible aspects to the although there were terrible aspects to the revolution as well, it's also can be a great source of pride, that we did some things that were pretty amazing in the world and really set some new ideas that had not happened before and that a lot of other countries have been able to build on.
Yeah, it really is incredible. And then as an English teacher, you've got a little bit of an intersection there with the history component. How do you kind of work through that to really highlight this information for your students as well?
Out of all the subjects, I feel like English and history just completely go hand in hand. And it's never really that difficult to me to integrate them. The difficult part is making the effort, finding the time, making it a priority. But as soon as you do that, it's pretty easy to make it happen. They're both about rhetorical analysis, about reading and interpreting, researching informational texts. English just kind of goes a lot further into the literary side of it, although history does somewhat too. So I think as long as you make it a priority, you can do it. So like in my advanced English 9 class, we are doing a unit on the Holocaust. So really, from my perspective, I'm trying to get the kids to read and interpret and analyze informational texts and then produce expository informational text. But I chose to wrap that around the Holocaust. We're doing some book clubs where the kids got to pick which memoirs or novels they want to read from that era so they can discuss together. And we're starting off with a sort of presentation that they're doing in pairs on different topics about the Holocaust, so we can all really build our knowledge and before we kind of get started in that. So that's kind of been an easy way to integrate some history into my English class. And then in my comp classes, NWAC, that's concurrent through NWAC, and so they give me a lot of latitude in how to kind of center our study of all the composition skills you need in college as a freshman around whatever we want. So I did the first semester, we're studying social psychology just because it's so interesting and there's a lot of history involved in that. We've looked a lot at the civil rights movement and we're reading To Kill a Mockingbird, which really ties into that. So we started that off with the kids made a collaborative slideshow where we looked at what are all the things that happened in America in 1968. And that's just 1 year, but everything changed that year. I mean, you name it, and it was insane. So we kind of had fun just building our knowledge, again, that context before we delved into a work of literature about the history that informs it, because stories are stories, whether they're fictional or whether they're real. Actually, I wanted to tell you that I got to sit in on a live stream from Ken Burns before we got started writing these resources. And he was in his living room. You could see the art on his walls. It was very cool. I was geeking out. But he said something that has stuck with me, and I've been telling everybody ever since. He said that we love to make arguments, and we need to tell stories. I'm going to say that again because it came out funny. He said that we love to make arguments when we need to tell stories. And that's really been the focus of all of his work is storytelling, because we can only absorb so much information delivered in a factual way and be affected by it. But when we're telling stories, that's really when people identify with each other and change their minds and are empathetic toward each other. And so as an English teacher, that's something I really try to pass on to my students is storytelling is important to get your point across, to affect others, to change the world. And also it's listed on so many job listings now, jobs that seemingly have nothing to do. So, maybe in sales or in science or just all kinds of things. If you look at job listings that are out there right now, one of the top skills they all list is storytelling, which I think is really interesting. And I think Ken Burns really hit the nail on the head with that one.
That is really interesting. Storytelling. Mm-hmm. I guess I have some job security, huh?
Yeah.
It sounds like there's just so much to this. And regardless of the topic that we're talking about in a history class, mm-hmm. there's only so much you can touch upon on it.
Sure.
And you've got the whole school year where you're talking about history and choosing what to discuss and what not to. How has this helped you kind of consider about bridging the gap with other civic topics that might work their way into history? What mm-hmm. ways do you think you might be able to do that now that you've had this experience with this documentary?
Yeah. One thing I'm enjoying doing is, I mentioned the National Constitution Center before that kind of got me roped into this. And they do this really neat thing where you can Zoom with their staff and also legal scholars that they bring in. And it's for free. You just have to kind of sign up. Any teacher can do it on the National Constitution Center website. And they will do it at the time of your choosing. So if your class starts at 9:53, they'll be there at 9:53, and it'll last as many minutes as you have to give. And if you have 6 sections of a class, they'll do it 6 times, which is pretty amazing, like on your schedule. And so I've done that a couple times, and it's been a really neat way to work in the study of the Constitution or parts of it to really different parts of the curriculum, and just trying to make that happen really is kind of opened my eyes that if you work hard enough, there's a lot of civic topics that you can work into a lot of other studies, which I teach high schoolers, and it's just so important right before they're going out into the world to start their adult lives, to start their voting lives, that they be engaged citizens and know how our country was founded and know, what the Constitution says and all those kinds of things.
Absolutely. And then to that end, what advice would you give other teachers as they work to perhaps integrate documentaries or content of that nature into their learning process in schools?
Yeah, my best advice, I think, is just that there is so many amazing free resources out there that you can just go get in a minute. You don't have to reinvent the wheel unless you enjoy doing that. But again, the National Constitution Center, PBS Learning Media, Facing History and Ourselves, the Folger Shakespeare Library even has some historical type stuff on it. All of those are just really easy places to start, again, for free. I don't think you even have to have an account for any of them. You can just Google them and get going. And they just have so many resources that have been vetted, that have been created by teachers who are in the classroom and edited by historians. And they're just so serious about quality production and then making sure that everything is historically accurate, that everything is nonpartisan also. So I think those are just great resources to go to.
All right. And then how can we look for and experience this documentary so we can view it for ourselves?
Yeah, let me pull that up. So the film premieres at 7 p.m. Central on PBS. It's Sunday, November 16th. They have a live stream through their website. So if you don't have an antenna, you can watch it that way as well. It's free for anyone to access. I'm really excited for people to see the sights, hear the sounds of the revolution, hear the stories. And also, they are read in some extremely famous actors' voices. So I think people will have fun hearing those and realizing, wait a minute, John Adams is such and such.
And I think what I was looking at it as well, that you can access the teaching resources from the PBS website as well?
Yes, they have already released, I think, 4 of them, but all of them will be released. Actually, I don't know if I can remember the date. I think I have it in my phone if you want me to look it up.
Oh, that's okay. Well, I would just encourage listeners to tune in and pay attention. You said it's over the course of several weeks, so they'll have plenty of opportunities to kind of go back and see what's being shared as it progresses.
Yes, I believe it's 1 week before the film premieres. The resources will all be available.
Right, there you go. There you go. Wait, is there anything else that you'd like to share? We've talked about so much in this incredible experience. Is there anything I didn't consider to mention?
Well, one thing I wanted to let people know is that social studies teachers grades 3 through 12 can sign up for a free live stream with all 3 filmmakers, so Ken Burns, Sarah Botstein, and David Schmidt. And that'll be November 18th at 5:30 Central. You do have to sign up ahead of time, so you can go to PBS Learning Media's website to do that. But just a really cool opportunity to hear from those people and see Ken Burns' living room, maybe, if you want to see it. And I also want to say that, like I mentioned before, none of this would have happened if I hadn't gone to that Landmarks Development Week from the National Endowment of the Humanities a couple years ago. That's where everything started. And I really wanted to go to a different session last summer. They have them all over the country on all different kinds of topics. And unfortunately, the executive branch defunded that whole program. So I got a letter saying, sorry, it's not happening, as did all the other teachers across the country who were looking forward to that. And then, PBS has had their federal funding cut as well. So it's just a real loss to our students, to our communities. And like I said, these are just such bipartisan, serious organizations that produce such great learning materials that it's a real loss when we don't have those. If you ever have a chance to support any of those things, I would just strongly encourage people to. Also, I want to say this experience was very humbling. I was having my work on a topic that I'm not an expert at, history, being reviewed by some of the foremost constitutional scholars in the U.S. And it was terrifying. It was so scary to just let them tear it up, and be okay with that and respond to that and build on it. And it's just a great reminder as a teacher that that's how many of my students feel all the time, whether it's my classroom or somewhere else. They probably have a place that they're showing up every day and feeling underprepared, feeling like they need extra help. And I was the person who needed extra help, and they gave it. And it was just such a good reminder that that we're all growing, we're all learning. None of us are experts at everything. We're all probably an expert at something. But that's what life is about: is just waking up and learning and being humble and saying, you know what, I would love to take your help, and I'd love to get better and grow.
Right. I've always said that if you think you've arrived, it's time to re-examine your outlook and where you have room to grow, because we always have room to grow, and being constant learners, regardless of how you seek it out. Sometimes you're just seeking out a really fun opportunity. It becomes something greater just because you're getting out there. Well, gosh, thank you for sharing all this with us, Autumn. I'm so excited to see the documentary. I was looking over the PBS information a little bit earlier, and I just got more and more excited as I went through it. So it's going to be really cool. And I really appreciate your being here today and sharing this amazing experience with us.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you. You can catch this and previous episodes of Springdale Today on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, and listen to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Springdale Today. I'm your host, Mary Jordan, and I look forward to talking to you next time about what happens in Springdale today.
From a small spark kindled in America, a flame has arisen, not to be extinguished.
We think about independence movements of the 20th century. You don't always recognize the fact that the United States actually started that.
The American Revolutionary Movement served as a model for freedom from oppression.
America is predicated on an idea that tells us who we are, where we came from, and what our forebears were willing to die for.
Colonists said no taxation without representation. The fear was, if we give in to this precedent, what will they do in the future?
Crisis changes people. It gave different people different ideas about what they should be doing.
It gave them a space to make this democracy real.
The founders thought we can start over again. We can begin the world anew.
The British objective is to suppress the rebellion, force them to acknowledge the authority of the king.
Washington understands the war he's fighting. He doesn't have to win. He only has not to lose.
He becomes quite eloquent in trying to persuade people we're all Americans.
We see regiments with individuals who are not carrying arms, doing essential labor, including women.
They are at the forefront of this movement.
One of the most remarkable aspects is that you had such different places come together as one nation.
It mushrooms into a global campaign that touches Europe and all parts of the world.
It so excites us that we are the product of a revolutionary moment where the world turned upside down.
To believe in America is to believe in possibility.
Springdale Today is a production of Springdale Public Schools Communication Office.
The podcast is hosted by Mary Jordan and is produced and edited by Micah DeLacy.
Be sure to subscribe to Springdale Today for free on your favorite podcast platform.
And don't forget to follow Springdale Today on social media for episode updates and behind-the-scenes conversations.
Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us in the future
as we continue to learn about the amazing stories happening in Springdale today.